Hi everyone, today we've got a scene from the Lancaster Canal. It's a really nice summer sky and summer scene with a little bit of water, so that's going to be good fun for us to have a go at. I've drawn it out very loosely. The line here that I've used as the horizon line is the top of the raw sienna field. Then I've got these hills, a rough idea where the tree line is. Along here the water's edge, rough idea of where the shrubs are at the edge of the water, and a little bit down here. I've just popped a little bit of masking fluid on at the bottom. I'm not sure if you can see that. Nice and fine. I've used my trusty knitting needle to do it, turned it upside down and just stroked the masking fluid on. I'm just letting that dry at the moment. Colours wise, I've mixed up some raw sienna. I've got some cobalt blue with permanent rose, so a nice purpley colour. Cobalt blue, sap green, cobalt blue and burnt sienna to make a grey, and then intense blue or Windsor blue red shade or Prussian blue and burnt sienna. Any of those blues will do, and then with burnt sienna makes a really nice dark green, and you want that fairly thick. The rest are all of a medium consistency. Okay, so we're going to start with the sky. Pop some water on. I'm going to come down to the hills. So nice 2 layers of water gives us plenty of time to do a really nice cloudy sky. Just dab a little bit off, it's a bit wet today. Okay, so I'm going to come on with my cobalt blue first of all, so I'm using my round number 10. I'm going to pop that on, get a picture where I can see it, that's helpful. Circular motions, small circular motions, pushing down with the brush. You're going for an impression of rather than exact. If you wanted to, you could lift out with a little bit of kitchen towel to get some of these whiter clouds a bit sharper, but I'm going for a softer look today. So just plenty of cobalt blue. And just build this up. I'm going to swap down to a number 6 round now. So we're going to come in with a little bit of cobalt blue in places. Make it a bit stronger in places. And then I'm coming into the purple colour now. Just make sure you give it a good mix. So this is going to be a little bit darker. It's not too purple, but it's going to show as purple. It's quite bluey in colour, so it's just going to show us a little bit darker really. Just coming around the edge of this more defined cloud, mainly this bottom edge. And take a few wispy bits through at the bottom. A few wispy bits this side. It's not much on the brush now, and I'm just bringing this through. Just there a little bit. It's all about balance. You need to get this colour moving in enough places that it holds together as part of the sky, and not stands out to be glaringly obvious as a different colour in the sky. If that makes sense. So I'm just making sure I've got it. It tends to be a rule of thumb, if you've got it in 3 places, that it works and you don't notice this as much. Okay, so that's looking quite nice now. Rinse my brush out. I'm going to come into the grey. So this is burnt sienna, mainly cobalt blue. I'll stick with my number 6. Circular motion. Just means I'm in a little bit more control. I don't want it to be so dark, cloudy, gloomy, stormy. I want summer's day cloud. So again, circular motion, and just keep moving this around. If it looks a bit strong, dab a little bit off onto the kitchen towel. It's mainly coming in from this side. This darker cloud. Make sure you don't eliminate all your white. Again, this is quite, I've got very little on the brush when I'm coming in here. Just dabbing a few little bits again, just for balance. Bring a little bit through that cloud. I'm just going to come back into the blue, cobalt blue, just a little bit more because this is quite white, and just a tiny dab on the brush. I'm just bringing a little bit in just to eliminate just too much whiteness on that cloud. Okay, so I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so that sky's nice and dry now. I'm going to come along these distant hills. A little bit of water. I'm going to pop on a little bit of raw sienna. So the raw sienna is going to make it feel like it's going a little bit more into the distance when we bring on the green. If you keep these a little bit paler, as in have more water on the brush when you dip into the colour, it'll make them set back a little bit. So that was the raw sienna. Then I'm going to bring in a little bit of sap green. So you do want them to be green, so just keep going over, but you don't want them to be too bright. So nice and pale. So that was with my round number 10. Then I'm going to drop down to my round number 6. and a little bit of the grey. I'll bring this a bit closer. What you can see here is we've got like lines in the field, so I'm just going to give an idea of where those are. So as I'm coming in, I'm making sure I haven't got too much paint on the brush. The brush is pretty much dry when I've gone into the paint, so it's not moving too far, because it's nice that they're going to be soft. So you can always dab off a little bit on the kitchen towel if you want to. I'm just getting an idea of where these darker patches are on. Some of it's cloud, but some of it is actual fields and foliage and trees that we need to get in. You don't need to be too focused on it because it's in the distance, but you do need to get something in there that works. So just keep dabbing. Concentrate on the lines of the hills, making sure that they look nice, especially where it's a little bit darker. Now you'll notice that when I came on, I started with the green here. That's because this is a bit greener and a bit more forward than the other two. So I've started popping the green in there, then I've spread it. So that's a good tip there. Then I'm going to come into that really dark thick green. Dab it off a little bit. At this point you want to put these trees in nice and soft, but you don't want it to spread too far. So I'm going to come along. If at any point you come on and think, ooh, that's spreading too far, you can either dab a bit more off the brush or just wait a minute. It's having a little bit of patience. If you start at the very bottom and it spreads up too quickly, that's not so bad. But if you start at the top and it spreads too quickly, you've got nowhere to go. You've got to try and lift off. So it's about waiting till the sheen's gone off, but you've got a big area to do here, so you've got to bide the time right to get these trees in nice and soft. It's not the end of the world if they're not soft. It will still work, but it's just giving it an extra dimension. The softness gives it distance and depth. Lots of little bits here. I'll put some little shrubs in, which aren't really little, they'll be giant, but they look little on our picture. So it's just dab and leave it. Let the watercolour do its thing. Wants to be nice and thick, this bit. You can come over it again if you think it's not quite dark enough. Trick is to not fiddle with it too much though. I'm taking a little bit of dark in places. Now I've purposely left two bits, which is the bits that come over the hills here, because we need to pop these in. So you can just pop them in and leave the lines hard, or you can soften them in a little bit. It's up to you. So I'm going to pop this tree in. I'm just going to see what it looks like, because they're right at the edges, so it might work quite nicely to have these in harder. Just bring it in. Yeah, I think they work quite nicely, so we'll leave those harder in there. Okay, so to stop it moving now, I need to dry it off. Okay, so I've dried that off now, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this little bit on camera, But what tends to happen is when you dry it with a hairdryer is it fades quite a lot. So what I'm doing is just working in so that I've got some harder edges here as well. So this is my round number 6 and I'm dabbing in. So the first bit that I've concentrated on is these trees that come higher. So to make sure that the hardness comes down a little bit, so I've got this extra layer so it looks like that they're closer to us. So I'm just dabbing and creating a little bit of additional depth. Let me see if I can bring this closer. You'll be able to see. So you can see where I've come in with the darkness here. And I'll just bring a little bit in places along the bottom. So it's given an added dimension, like there's an extra layer there of foliage. And this dark against the light of the field will work really nicely. Okay, so there's only a few little bits there. I'll dry that one off. Okay, so that's nicely dried now. What I'm going to do is wet this distant bank. That includes all this shrubbery at the bottom edge as well. And round number 10 and into the raw sienna. So you want a horizontal stroke, just keep coming across. And I'm coming down to this shrubbery at the front. Okay, my brush has still got a bit of the raw sienna on. I'm just dabbing in to a touch of permanent rose. You don't want a huge amount on the brush, just a tiny dab. And I just want to just alter the colour slightly in places. Again, a tiny little bit more, and I mean tiny. You've got a tiny dot on the end of the brush. You don't want a pink stripe through your field. Just keep blending. And what you want is that to feel like you've got that little bit of definition and shadow there. Take a tiny bit more in here. So you just keep dabbing it off on the kitchen towel just to make sure I've not got too much. If you go on and there is too much, then just eliminate it by taking more raw sienna over. Okay, so I want plenty of sap green on my brush. And I'm going to come in at this bottom edge. Now what I want is for this to flow again. So for this first stage I'm going to get this nice softness flowing. So if I let go towards the top, I'm going to get more of that flow because the capacity on the brush is being released. So you just need to time it right depending on where you are on the picture, how much of that flow you want. You can drop down to a number 6 if you want, but this is quite a big area for you to get done in a short amount of time whilst it's still wet. And then you'll see it's tapering away. It's bigger at the front, as in this side, and then it's tapering away. Check you've got a nice edge on the bank. I need to come higher here. You see where I'm dabbing and releasing? There's more colour and paint coming off the brush there. My brush a bit of a rinse. I'm going to come in with some dark green now. So that same dark green, whilst it's still wet, number 6. Just going to come in with this towards the bottom of the bank. So wherever you can see that it looks a bit darker, dab a little bit of this in, but mainly towards the bottom of the bank. A little bit of wiggle and some definition up here. It's all about getting that variety in there. I'm trying to break up now that edge of sap green, because it's not all sap green along here. That's just breaking that up. I'm going to brush a rinse. And then I'm going to do the same with the purple from the sky. If you want to, you can take a little bit more rose in. There's a hint of purple in here. And drop those in. You could, if you wanted to if you like the rose colour, which you know I do, take some rose in as well, but it's quite sort of heathery coloured here, so it works nicely. Just make sure that you don't end up with any floating purple blobs. It's got to connect in. Okay, so the camera just cut off on the last little bit, so I've popped a few more little bits of the rose and cobalt blue mix just in down here. Then I've dried that off. So we're going to come on to the water now. So water on the water. And then I've got a little bit, just going to pour on about half a teaspoon of gum arabic. So I'm just moving that just where this reflection is going to be, and then spreading that down. It's just going to give us a little bit of a slowness of the spread, so that the reflection is more, because the water's not really moving that much, the reflection's more still. Still got some sap green on that brush, so I'll just get rid of that. Okay, and then we're going to come in with the cobalt blue first of all, and because the water's quite still, what you'll see is that it's reflecting the clouds, it's reflecting the bank, so we're going to try and get those in now. So circular motion, it's a sort of picture where you're looking at what you've done in the sky and what the photograph is saying you've done in the sky. So it needs to replicate your sky more. But it doesn't have to be exact. So I'm doing circular motion, getting those clouds in first of all. The gum arabic will slow the flow of the paint, but it will also give you more time. Make sure that I'm coming over this edge of masking fluid. I want this to show up later. The only way that's going to show up is if I come over it. Right, rinse my brush. I'm going to come into the purple colour. Just an odd dab here and there. Then into the dark grey. Which you won't see a lot of, but there is a little bit there. Definitely in this corner. There's like a little bit here as well. I'm going to take a little bit just down here. Dab back into the blue, just create a little bit more in there. I don't want that to be too white. I'm just blending it through a little bit. I want clouds, but I don't want it to be so light. It's because it's on the water. Okay, then I'm going to come in with the sap green along this edge. So I'm still using my round number 10 at the minute because I need to move fairly quickly. And then into that dark green mix. An odd little bit of white on the bank does tend to work as the light catching. Sorry, I just kicked the tripod then. So it does tend to work. You can leave that odd little bit of light. And bring, you'll find that in the water it's much darker, so although you're reflecting the same colours, there will be more of this dark colour in there. So what you find when you pop this down is it's just not flowing in the same way, and that's good because you're controlling the flow with that gum arabic. And then lastly we need a bit of that purple colour in there. Now it always seems a bit daunting when you're doing this all in one go, but the gum arabic does slow down the drying time, so you have got time to do this. The last thing I'm going to do is just come on with a flat brush and just break through. So this isn't wet, and I don't mind if it moves the paint a little bit. It's just starting to create those ripples. Now most of this will flow horizontally. It's very easy to get bogged down by that bit there and think it's not flowing horizontal. If you flow it horizontal, it won't look like your river or canal. It's going off at a slant. So just keep it horizontal. So nice horizontal strokes, just break through. You can take a little bit of grey on the brush with this flat brush and just bring that in to break through this section as well if you want to. It's like a little bit of shadow at the bottom. I'll just move it this way so I can get that in. Come through here with a little bit of the grey as well. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so I've dried that off now and I've rubbed the masking fluid off this corner, and I'm very lightly with a tiny bit of raw sienna coming in. Make sure your brush isn't too wet at this stage, coming in over this area at the back. If your brush is too wet, what will happen is it will lift the gum arabic. So this is just a little bit of the rose that I'm just dropping in to give a bit of peachiness again. So I'm just using my round number 6. And then I'm coming in with a sap green just on this bottom corner. So this is all on to dry. Just going to twizzle round. And I've got a long thin brush, which is my line writer, and a little bit of the sap green. I'm just going to bring that through. Just to break up that edge. I can do the same just through these bits of raw sienna. Sometimes masking fluid can be a little bit clumpy, so this is just giving it that break that it needs. And painting downwards is much easier to get a nice point. Okay. Okay, so we've got this bank to work into now. So I'm just going to dry this corner off. Okay, so for this last stage I've turned upside down. I've got my trusty sponge with all the bobbly bits. I'm going to come into some sap green. So I've wrung the sponge out really well. You don't want to pick up too much paint, and I'm going to start by just dragging a little bit. Just along this bottom section, just to start to give a little bit more definition. Then I'm going to dab. So dab, twist. I'm going to start to build this up. So you want to do this gradually. You want to make sure it's not too wet. I can turn it back round now. For that dragging action, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't get any into the water. Where you're coming down here and you want littler bits, you just need to squeeze the sponge nice and little. Dab, twist, just keep building up. It's quite dense shrubbery and foliage, so there's plenty of scope to keep adding. I'm coming into the darker green now. So I haven't rinsed the sponge in between. Give it a bit of a rinse now. I'm going to come into some of the purple. Bring that in towards the top. So this is just the start of building up this foliage. The sponge just makes it look more natural. Okay, so I'm picking up some sap green on my number 6, so whilst this is all still damp you'll get a much more natural effect. So I'm just running this through, because I don't want it to all be one density with the sponge. I want to break that up so it looks more like closer foliage. So these little stems are appearing. Obviously as I get further away I'm going to see less of these little stems. And that's going to give the sense of distance. And then into that dark green the same. Try not to think about it too much and just come on. The more you think about it and the more you plan, the more of a pattern you'll end up with. So just randomly make marks and move along. And you want to focus it more to this side all the time. So into the purple colour again. Don't eliminate all of the soft purple you've got in the background, so make sure that when you're popping this in, you're popping it in a slightly different places. You can come over some of it, but you want to have some of that softness still there to give you that depth. Remember, as you come back, you want smaller marks, not a lot of this happening. Just dab this through a little bit. I don't want it to look too much like lavender. Some of this is more purple flowers in shrubbery, I think. So I'll just dab this through a little bit, just tiny dabs, and then it'll start to look less like lavender, more like shrubbery. So I'm just bringing this out a little bit. Just going to dab a little bit into a little bit of the rose colour, just so I've got a little bit more showing in this front section. Again, personal preference, you don't have to do this. It'll just shoot that bit forward a little bit because it's got the rose in. Okay, so that's all finished. See you next week.